Simply, you go to play tournament game and you prepared for a long game or for interesting game, for big struggle. And a lot of times you get disappointed by being crushed in the opening. Well, I was, for example, once in my earlier career, I was trapped several times in the opening in some unusual tactical battle. So that called, sometimes they are opening traps with a pattern, sometimes they are opening traps without a pattern. So either way, you don't want to be on the wrong side of it. Once you learn these traps and learn why they happen, you will be avoiding them, and also number of times you can use them as your own weapon. Now, let's see what can happen. So you play the opening, and your strategy in the opening, like in every opening, is quick development of pieces, activity of your pieces, and that's what you base your opening repertoire on. Well, let's look at one of the century-old trap. In this position of Queen's Gambit, normal move for black is bishop to e7. However, black plays knight d7. This is very, very primitive trap. It's like a changing move order. And if white tries to win a pawn by playing c takes d, e takes d, and knight takes d5, taking advantage of pinned knight on f6, black simply plays knight takes d5, and after bishop takes to d8, black plays bishop b4, check, and white is forced to interpose the queen, and black takes the queen, and then takes the white bishop, and black is a piece up. Now, this is very simple, very primitive, century-old trap. And the idea was used by some players to set up the same trap in a lot more complicated version of this trap in different openings even. Well, one more version of this trap in more complicated opening of more complicated variation of Queen's Gambit. For example, in this position, white plays knight f3 or bishop g5. As I see knight f3 followed by bishop g5 or bishop g5 followed by knight f3, we get to the transposition. For example, knight f3, c5, and bishop g5. As I mentioned, knight f3 and bishop g5 can be played in any move order. Black now plays c takes d, knight takes d4, and white goes e5. This has happened in a tournament game of very strong players, grandmasters. White played knight to b5, d4 to b5, and here black played a6. And all of a sudden, we see that white is in a very serious trouble. Of course, white, when they played knight to b5, they did anticipate a6 move. And they prepare tactical shot, knight takes d5. And here's what is this knight takes d5 tactics based on. If black plays a takes b, which did happen, white plays knight takes f6, check. If black plays g takes f, queen takes d8, check. King takes, bishop takes f6, check. King moves anywhere, and bishop takes rook on h8, and white has extra material and the winning position because this bishop before check, white just simply moves the king, and white is winning. However, there is something wrong with the whole variation. Black has a lot stronger continuation here. And in a position where black played a6 and white played knight takes d5 and black played a takes b and knight takes f6 check. This position is lost for white. Black has queen takes f6. White has to take the queen, and you see the same idea from the first and primitive trap that I showed you in beginning. Now black plays bishop b4 check, and white is totally lost. After queen d2, bishop takes d2, king takes d2, g takes f. Game is over. Black has an extra piece and easily won position. So what did black do here? Did black base all their game on this trap? No. Let's go carefully and slowly through this variation again, and we see that black played normal developing moves. Sometimes to set up the trap, you damaging your position. You're making some move that is not good unless your opponent falls into trap. But in this case, black played all the normal, regular, obvious, and logical moves. This is position we had, and in this position actually it's black's move. C takes d, knight takes d4, and black is challenging white in the center, and they want to play now. They want to play for the center. If white goes knight to f3, black goes d4, and they have very comfortable position. So white goes knight b5, and then black goes a6. Now white has two options: either go with a knight on a3, and after d4, they have terrible position. And the reason why, same reason, on knight d5, knight takes d5 again, followed by bishop takes d8, bishop b4 check, and black is winning. So this is bad option for white, and obviously they did not, white didn't go knight d4 to b5, and after a6 to go to a3. So that was based on knight takes d5 shot. So everything black did was logical and strong. And a takes b, knight takes f6, queen takes f6 is a powerful tactical shot with temporary queen sacrifice that decides the game. White is lost. Now, this can happen. I've seen this happen more than once in the tournament games. Now, this is a pattern that was used from the first example I showed you. Now, let's look at one very interesting tactical possibility. c4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, and black plays f5. Now this position is very well known in modern chess theory, and white has several possibilities. They can go d3 or they can go g3 and bishop g2 with normal game, or they can go d4. d4 is much more competitive move, and white tries to get early advantage in the center. What can happen is black plays e4, and now instead of retreating the knight on d2, that is one of the possible continuations, white decides not to block c1 bishop by playing knight d2, but they decided to play bishop g5 first, attacking black's queen. Black played knight f6, and in this position, the correct continuation, correct move for white is to play knight d2. But what can happen if white is overly ambitious? And white can go d5 move. Now white think if those exchanges happen, they will have good position, and if c6 knight moves anywhere, then white knight will go from f3 to d4. However, after d5 move, black has big advantage, maybe winning. E takes f. Now white has to take black's knight, and you see the queen on d8 and bishop on g5 are on the same diagonal. And normally what can happen, it always favors the player that has bishop on g5 that pinning the queen. But we see now the exactly opposite case. Here black plays f takes g2, and now obviously white doesn't want to take on g2 with the bishop, because after b takes c, they are pawn down. So what they will play in this position is play c takes d. Now this is there is a tactical shot here that is not prepared by black's play. A lot of times you see tactical shots, so when I have concentration of the pieces, I make some sacrifice or some powerful threat on the side where I am attacking. But here, unexpectedly, black plays knight takes d7, and white is totally lost. Well, after f takes, excuse me, so f takes g first, and after c takes d, knight takes d7, and white is totally lost, because white's bishop is hanging on g5, and if white plays bishop takes queen on d8, then black takes white's rook, promoting into queen. And you can see black has decisive material advantage. So this tactics was not prepared by black. It's just black had to use it because this tactical opportunity was there. It's not something black played for. Black cannot force white to play d5. But white can simply play knight d2, and then we have normal position after h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. It's a normal double-edged position. Or even instead of h6, bishop e7. It's something that's been played many times. Let me point that knight takes d4 is not that good for black, because white plays knight to knight takes, d takes to e4. And then black's knight on d4 is hanging. So the point I want to make here, so this you can take this variation. If you like to play this type of position for black, you can play it in a regular tournaments. This is very playable position. Search database for the openings played, for the games played with this opening. And if you get lucky, there is a trap that can win you a game instantly without practically putting much of an effort. So, but if not, then you know that you're going to get normal position and game will go on. Now, the other example I want to show you, we are talking about games that end in the opening. So where we don't see middle game, we don't see end game, we see opening, which is the end of the game. So here is a game between two grandmasters. c45, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6. g3, that was played by Petrosian, former world champion. Nothing indicates that game can end here in about 3-4 moves, especially played on such a high level in international tournament. Bishop b4. So white played knight d5. Knight takes d5, and c takes d5. In this position, black had to play one of two moves, either knight d4 or knight e7. However, they chose to play e4. You see, in a previous example, we saw when that happened, and black won quickly by playing knight takes d7. Here we have same idea, but entirely different result. Now, in 2 moves, game ended. How can grandmaster miss this? Well, he did. Pawn takes knight on c6, and black plays pawn takes knight. And here white made move, and black resigned immediately. White played queen to b3, and we see that black is totally lost. Bishop on b4 hanging. If bishop moves anywhere, then pawn will take on b7, and you see the fork, and black loses a piece. And if black plays a5, protecting the bishop, then white plays accordingly a3, and bishop has to move, after which black loses a piece. If black plays pawn takes pawn on e2, it's just one move extension, doesn't really change anything because white simply takes back. And now black loses a piece. They hardly have any compensation for a piece, and when 2 grandmasters play and one loses a piece, game ends right there. So that's what happened in that game, and black lost in about 7 or 8 moves, whatever it was there. So this is well, you have to know these traps, even if you have no intention to trap opponent. Opening traps you have to be familiar with, not to get in them, and if you have an opportunity, to go for them without damaging your position. That's very, very important. Now, let's see one very interesting example of a trap. This happened years ago, and I remember when I saw first this trap, I was very fascinated by the beauty of it, by unexpectancy. Well, let's go to regular position of a Grunfeld defense. Knight c3, d5, c takes d, knight takes d5, e4, knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop g7, bishop c4, pawn c5, knight e2, knight c6, bishop e3. This is one of the best known position if in the Grunfeld defense and in modern chess theory. This is very old position that had been played, I don't know, many, many decades ago and still played today. Very popular. Normal continuation here, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and black castles. This is the normal way for black to play. However, what black did in this game, they decided to exchange queens. They played queen a5 and expecting from white queen to d2 move, which is, by the way, the best move in this position. Queen d2, queen takes d2, and king takes d2 with slightly better game for white. However, white didn't want to exchange queens, and they played bishop to d2. Now, obviously, black doesn't want to go back to d8 with the queen, so they decided to play queen a3. Now you see the d4 pawn is hanging, and white played here very, very interesting move, very creative and very dangerous for black move. Rook to b1. What is the idea behind this move? Rook to b1 is very dangerous move for black because black cannot win, cannot take pawn on d4. What will happen after knight takes d4? Knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, black wins a pawn and loses the game immediately after bishop b5 check. Now you can see black has practically, not practically, they have three legal moves. King to d8, king to f8, and bishop to d7. They all lose, and they all lose immediately. First, let's look at bishop d7. White can simply take on d7, king takes d7, and after bishop b4, they lose a lot of material. Starts with a bishop on d4. Same thing will happen to black if they go king d8 instead. Bishop b4 is an instant killer. If king goes to f8, then bishop h6 is a winning move. Bishop h6 check. Now if king goes to g8, then queen takes d4. And if bishop goes to g7, then queen to d8, checkmate. That means that in this position, we have, that means black cannot play knight takes d4. Okay, but what's a big deal? So they will not take the knight. They will not take the pawn on d4. But if they don't take the pawn on d4, notice that white has terrible threat. The threat is d5, and when knight moves anywhere, on b4, on a5, practically anywhere, after bishop b4, black's queen is trapped. So here, black has a dilemma. What to do with the queen? Of course, they can try to go queen d6, and it looks like it's the only move. But if this is the only move, then white can go d5, and after knight e5, bishop b4, then bishop b5 check. White has significant advantage. But maybe this is the only way to prevent d5 threat. However, this position does not indicate that white in two moves can get in serious trouble and practically lose the game. The move that black played is a castle. This is very, very unexpected move that can be made either by very weak player or by very strong player, because black is totally ignoring, in this case, white's threat. Now, we are still in the opening part of the game. So, unsuspected, white played d5, and black moved knight to e5. And here, white played bishop to b4, and white did trap black's queen. Queen is trapped. Now white expected black to play knight takes c4, bishop takes a3, and knight takes a3. And white has queen for two minor pieces, which is not enough, and black is lost. However, that's not at all what black had in mind. After bishop b4 move, white is losing, and white is losing immediately. The move, it does not indicate, this position does not indicate that white's king is in serious trouble. After queen f3 move, this is a shocking move, one of the most shocking moves I've ever seen in the openings in my life. We can see that this queen on f3 cannot be taken. For example, if pawn takes queen, knight takes f3 check, which gives white only one legal move, and bishop to h3 checkmate. This is the checkmate where black never was attacking. So this is like a mate from nowhere. From nowhere, they got the position, and in two moves, attack was like 2 moves long. It's like a nuke, like a nuclear bomb. So, and exploded immediately, and white was totally unexpected and unprepared. After bishop b4, queen f3, obviously white did not take the queen, but then what happens? Black saves the queen, attacks white's g2 pawn, white's e4 pawn, and bishop on c4 is still attacked. So the best move for white is the castling. Then black took the pawn on e4, and now bishop on c4 is unpre, has to move. Now what happens here? Black wins a pawn, bishop has to go to b5, not to b3, because bishop on b4 is hanging, you see? So bishop has to go to b5, and then black can go, I don't know, maybe rook d8. Black has here many, many good moves, and instead of white thought that 2 moves ago black should have resigned, and all of a sudden we see that black has extra pawn, about to win second pawn and have totally winning position. This is unexpected. Now this you can say that this is an opening trap, but this is not the opening trap that black is aiming for. This is the antidote to the trap that white set up. Sometimes you set up the trap and you get into trap yourself. That happens very frequently, especially in the opening part of the game. Now, this is another interesting opening trap. And I would advise you, so if you go over them and you see, and if you like all the positions around this trap, you cannot know just this trap, and therefore you start playing Grunfeld defense. What if your opponent does not fall in the trap? Then you have to deal with the position that you are not familiar with, and you will be very uncomfortable and likely to be suffering in a big part of the game. Now, let's look at another very interesting opening, very sharp opening on black for black. D4, D5, C4, and knight to C6. This is called Chigorin defense, and normally white plays either E6 or C6, supporting the center. Here, after knight C6, what black's plan is to give up the center and let white get the center, but then they are putting serious pressure on this center. Let's see what happened in the game. C takes D, queen takes D5, knight to F3, and in this position, the best move for black is E5. This is theory, and I played myself for white. And then we can go bishop to D2, and after bishop B4, we can go to bishop D2, and so on, long game. But in one of the games, after knight F3, black went bishop G4. The idea is very understandable and very logical. What black wants to do, black wants to castle long, go E5, and immediately attack this D4 pawn. What came out of it, we're going to see in a second. Knight to C3, attacking black's queen. Queen goes to A5. That's what black was prepared to do. Now they want to castle long and play E5, putting pressure on D4 pawn. After queen A5, white played D5, attacking knight. And black, as expected, castled long. Now white plays bishop to D2. Obviously, white cannot take the knight because rook is going to take white's queen. So this can easily happen on a reasonable level in any tournament. Bishop to D2. Black plays bishop takes F3. Well, what black wants to do is put the knight B4 and take this pawn on D5 with a knight. But if they play immediately knight B4, they're going to be in a serious trouble after knight E5, attacking F7 and G4. So what black did, first they took the knight on F3. Bishop takes F3, pawn takes F3. And now they go knight B4. It looks like they feel like they're going to win this D5 pawn. And all of a sudden, instead of protecting D5 pawn, white plays A3, attacking the knight and helping and kind of forcing black to take on D5. And after knight takes D5 and knight A4, black's queen is trapped. black's queen does not have any moves, and game is over. Again, this game was played on reasonably high level, so on that level, neither side likes to play without a queen. So this is another, you can tell this is a trap, but it's not really a trap. It's just ended that way. White played normally by developing the pieces, and what black did, they made two moves in the queen. This is clear violation of chess principles, and they castled on a long side without developing pieces, and that's why we saw such a quick crush. So let's look at one interesting example. Also, black got punished for making, I'm not going to tell you that what you have to do in the early stage of the game, you have to develop your minor pieces, your castle. Don't take your queen out in early stage of the game. Some people on a reasonably high level, they think, okay, I know this rule, I went through all this, but it's okay if I can. There are some exceptions, and it's okay in some cases to take queen out. Yeah, but it's okay. That's why they call it an exception. They call it an exception because it's an exception. It happens once in a great while. However, if it happens too frequently, it's not an exception. It's a violation of the basic principles. So let's see another example when black developed queen in early stage and made two moves with it. d4, d5, e5, c5, c3, knight c6. Now, knight f3, queen b6. It's okay to make this move, queen b6, because black is putting pressure on d4 and b2. And white played bishop e2, and in this position, black violated the main principles, main rule. What they did is they played knight to e7. Now, why is this violation? This move is real bad because white played d takes c. You see, if in a position with black knight on g8, white takes on c5, obviously black is going to recapture with the bishop. But now what happens, black already made one move with the queen, and after knight e7, white captures. Now they have to make second move with the queen, and if they take, here is what's going to happen. White is going to develop. Now black has to make third move with the queen, and that's in the opening. That's bad. That's a violation of main principles. So what black did is after d takes c, they decided to play queen c7 and decided to take the e5 pawn instead, and they think they're going to be in good shape after they take the central pawn instead. White plays knight to d4, and now black has a problem. Now threatening knight b5 and knight d6 check. Knight b5, and when queen moves, knight d6 check. So black plays knight takes e5. Now white plays knight b5. You see, now if queen moves anywhere, except for taking on c5, if queen moves anywhere, then white is going to play knight d6 check, and black is going to be in serious trouble. But after queen takes c5. Here is the punishment. This is the third move with the queen in the opening. And after white plays queen d4, the game is over. Why the game is over? Because white has two serious threats. They are attacking queen, they are attacking knight. Queen cannot take queen. This is out of question because then white plays pawn takes queen, attacking knight, and playing knight c7 check next move. Black is totally lost. They are losing material. What is the other thing they can do? Now black can play knight g6, protecting the knight and protecting the queen with the bishop. But then again, white takes the queen, and again, this fork on c7. So in this position, no matter what black can do here, what black will do here, they are losing exchange of piece, and they they resign in this position. So this position is now totally lost for them. Let's look at one more interesting example. Again, on a violation of the main principle that turned it into immediate punishment. If you violate some chess principles in the middle game, the chances are you will be punished, but not always severely. If you violate the principles in the opening, when not all your pieces developed, and most of your pieces not developed, the chances are you will be punished severely. And here is another good example. Let's go e4, e5, actually e4, c6. There's two examples. So let's start with the c6. d4, d5, knight c3, d takes e, knight takes e4, and knight f6. Very well known Caro-Kann defense. What is the normal move in this position for white? The normal move is knight takes f6 check, and then black has two ways to recapture that knight. The other possibility is knight g3, and maybe even knight g5 sometimes. However, white played a move that I do not recommend. Now, in this game, we're going to see white won brilliantly in 12-13 moves. Maybe 40. We're going to see how many moves it was. But white violated main principle once. Black should have gotten equality easily. But then black answers with a double violation on this violation. White played queen d3. That's not the move to play. Now queen d3, and here black makes terrible decision. Black plays e5. This is a bad decision because what they should have done, they should have taken the knight, queen takes, and simply play knight d7 and knight f6. That's how you take advantage of early queen development by white. Instead, they play e5, and when white took on e5, they made double violation. They have now to get this pawn back on e5, so they play queen a5 check, and after bishop d2, queen takes e5. They made two moves with the queen, and notice bishop on f8, bishop on c8, and knight on b8. They are all undeveloped. This is terrible. Now here we're going to see quick punishment. White castled long. Now you see that all of a sudden white was first to violate rule playing queen d3, and now they are way ahead in development. Now if black does not take the knight on e4, then they're just having a worse position. They should have played here bishop e7. That's the best move. Obviously, queen takes e4 is not good because of rook e1, and black loses its queen. So black thought they can simply get away with knight takes e4. But then comes immediate punishment. Queen to d8 check. Sometimes when you play this move, somebody plays against you, you see, wait a minute, my opponent may be drunk. He doesn't see that the d file is blocked and there is a bishop on d2. But white wins in two moves because king takes d8 and now bishop g5 check. That's a double check, and black has to play king e8 or king c7. In both cases, there is a checkmate. On king e8, rook to d8 is a mate, and on king c7, bishop to d8, it's also checkmate. So in both cases, here, black has been severely punished for terrible idea of making two moves, sacrificing pawn and making two moves in the opening with a queen with the and you notice one thing here. Even if black in this position played correctly bishop e7, you're going to notice one thing. That's how you make good judgment. Black already made two moves with a queen, and we know that queen cannot stay too long in the center of the board. So it's going to be third move they're going to have to make with the same piece. And this is also an expense of development. So now if white simply plays knight takes f6 and bishop takes f6, then rook e1, and if queen takes f6, now queen has to make, after bishop c3, third move and losing more time. That's why you have to have some principles and some rules that you don't violate. Now, what we show these traps, this is the ways of punishment. This is kind of different verdicts you can give to different punishment. Sometimes your opponent may get away with it, and sometimes they can't. So in this case, the cases we saw, they couldn't get away with it. Now, let me show you just kind of summary of what we just looked at. After e4, suppose they play e5. Now we go knight f3, and your opponent goes d6. Actually, this is one of the ways I recommend you to play against Philidor defense. d6, d4, knight to d7, and bishop c4. In this position, bishop e7 is one of the possible moves, but this move loses. And interestingly enough, this is a good example of exception. Now, after bishop e7, black loses, and in both cases, there are two cases, after d takes e, black can recapture with a knight or with a queen. And interestingly enough, this is early stage of the game, and the reason why I call it an exception, in both cases, white wins with the early development of the queen. Here is double standard. It's not a double standard. This is one concrete position exception. Now, if pawn takes e5, then queen d5. You don't make move like this in the opening unless it wins. And it does, because f7 square cannot be protected by black After knight h6, simply bishop takes h6, and white wins. And the case number 2, where black plays knight takes e5, knight takes e5, pawn takes e5. Now you go queen h5, attacking f7 and e5 pawns, and you see that best move, maybe the only move, black has is g6, then queen takes e5, attacking rook on h8, knight f6, and now bishop h6, and black is lost. White has an extra pawn, and amazingly enough, the queen in the center cannot be attacked, and also white is threatening bishop g7. Black is lost. This is an exception. So that's why we learn opening, that we learn different variations, and we look at different possibilities. So we have to know where is the rule, where is the exception, and very important, do not violate rules. Punishment is right around the corner waiting for you. Or you can use, if you strongly convinced that you do things right and your opponent violates rules, you have to look for punishment. It is there. Thank you very much.